Oklahoma City's next. Democrats line, Frank, good morning.
Good morning, Pedro. Thank you very much for CSPAN, and thank you for taking my call. I'd like to make almost the same comment as your previous caller. He talked about being a Vietnam vet. I'm a disabled Vietnam veteran, and I work with the young men and women now doing service officer work, helping them with their paperwork. And a lot of the issues are the same as the Vietnam veterans had, only they have the public support now. They may not support the war, but they do support the troops. And a lot of these young men and women coming back, it's awful hard for them to get their benefits from the Veterans Administration. And the burden of proof sometimes is laid too high on the veterans themselves. They keep talking about their service treatment records, what happened, and PTS is a big issue with the young veterans nowadays. And I can emphasize, because I draw disability for PTSD as a Vietnam vet. And I'll take my questions off the air, and thank you once again for taking my call. You have a blessed day.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for your service, and we definitely appreciate your sacrifice and your willingness to help everybody that's out there, all the veterans that are out there. This is a problem that has certainly come up in the public discussions, both in Congress and in the executive branch. Being able to help veterans work their way through the bureaucracy of the Veterans Administration and the other benefits that they have earned because of their service, that becomes a huge deal. And of course, with sequestration looming in terms of the federal government's budget, it will be an even greater challenge to make sure that the veterans get the benefits that they have earned and that they are owed basically by our society. So what you end up having here is a situation in which the social compact between the military and the society at large is certainly much better in this day and age than it was during your time in Vietnam and the immediate aftermath of Vietnam. And I think as a result, our country has matured as a society, and we understand that these brave men and women have done a lot of good things for our country to protect our freedom. The fact of the matter is now that we need to make sure that we put the right emphasis on helping them when they need our help, because they have definitely earned that help and that trust.
According to the president, we currently have about 66,000 troops of February this year. By February 2014, about 32,000 troops planned. What are some of the logistical challenges when it comes to personnel and equipment that face the United States?
Well, one of the callers mentioned it, actually, the fact that equipment in Vietnam was left behind, and the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong were able to use that equipment. That is certainly a challenge for any military force, because the facilities that we have over in Afghanistan are pretty extensive in some areas, such as Bagram Air Base. Kandahar used to be that way. Some other areas, and certainly in Kabul. So you have that logistical challenge of getting everything out and making sure that you don't leave anything behind that is of use to the Taliban. You have to go in with the planning assumption that it's going to be a worst-case scenario from the U.S. point of view, and that worst-case scenario would be that the Taliban actually take over and that the central government in Kabul cannot withstand the pressure, the diplomatic and the military pressure that the Taliban will mount against them once the American forces leave. So with that in mind, the logistical challenge is going to be huge, but the other challenge is that you have to cultivate relationships on the basis of mutual respect between the Afghan forces and the U.S. forces, and that's a very difficult thing to do with the rotation tempo that we have, and with the fact that we have a very clear goal of drawing down our forces, basically cutting them in half, over the next 12 months, and then going from there to cut them even further. So that's going to be the significant challenge. The more we leave, the less they trust us, and that in and of itself is worth several battalions of mechanized infantry, as they used to say, and that's going to be a huge issue going forward in terms of our ability to project our power and our ability to influence decisions by the Afghan government.
The Department of Defense says current goings-on on Capitol Hill might delay this as well. This is on February 15th, saying that a lack of an appropriations bill coupled with sequestration could eventually cause soldiers to be delayed in their redeployment home from Afghanistan, according to the Army's top officer.
That's right. And General Odierno, the Chief of Staff of the Army, is right. That's going to have a significant impact on our ability not only to affect this drawdown, but it's also going to have a significant impact on military readiness, on training, and really on the ability of the units in the field to stay focused on their mission. And one of the big problems is that as we draw down, the mission becomes less focused. And it's a very, very difficult thing for us to convey to the troops what they need to do in order to keep safe and what they need to do in order to make sure that the Afghans can take the lead in this next phase of this war.
Someone who served joins us from Warren, Ohio. Ben, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you. Did you serve in Afghanistan?
Yes, sir, I did. I was in Afghanistan in 2012. I'm an Army Reserve officer. I'm medical, and we were my unit, the 339th Cash, was the first combat support hospital from the Army Reserve to actually establish operations in Afghanistan out of the reserve component. And with listening to Colonel Leighton, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
I think your point of the illiteracy rate in Afghanistan is so crucial and so key to what we need to do as follow-on and avoid the mistakes we made when we assisted the Mujahideen with overthrowing the communist regime in Afghanistan. We just absolutely fell on our face and did not go in with civil and infrastructure and educational support to bring the entire country up to a level where they really could govern themselves. Somewhat of a parallel, but again, this situation in Kosovo, people were much more educated, but to me it seems to be the same thing, and I have served in Kosovo as well. But a lot of our mission when I was there in Kosovo was going out, teaching nurses, other healthcare professionals, this is how you take care of people, this is how you do your mission and your job medically.
Okay.
I was at the recent, and again, the last thing, at the Soma conference, the 18 Deltas really brought that up. As we're withdrawing from our, quote, guerrilla hospitals, Taliban's moving in and saying, we'll take care of you, but Americans are going. Thank you, sir.
Ben, thank you for your perspective.
Yeah, Ben, and thank you for your service in both of those conflict zones. That's, those are absolutely correct points to make, because the medical profession has a unique role to play in making sure that a country of whatever type is ready to go to the next step socially, economically, and from a governmental perspective. So when you do the kinds of things that you're doing, that actual point of contact, similar in some ways to what some of the Peace Corps elements did, it becomes a very, very important part of that hand that is extended by the U.S. to other countries and allows each of those countries to move forward. And in Afghanistan, there were certain areas, and certainly the part that you played and your unit played in that made a huge difference for that local area. But with the Taliban moving in and their promises of taking care of people, well, they're going to be taking care of them with 12th century medicine, and that is not going to have the same effect as what U.S. and NATO folks were able to do when it came to really putting medical care at the forefront for a population that needed it and didn't have it before.
Here's the last call. Christina from Oakland, Michigan, Independent Line.
Yes, thank you very much for C-SPAN, and I hope I can organize my thoughts. About 2004, I'm an RN. I flew to Phoenix to visit my brother, and I sat and talked with a military man who had just retired, and I wanted him to explain to me our tactics and how we started all this stuff in Afghanistan, because I have the mind of an RN, not a military person. And in my mind, I don't understand. We talk about, President Obama. Well, nobody even knew who he was when this all started. I couldn't understand way back then why we talked about bunker busters and everything else, why we went in, we announced we were going in, we hung for a while backing up the Northern Alliance. We did not go into Tora Bora and use all of our bunker buster bombs and all that stuff everybody talked about. We didn't do any of that stuff. We telegraphed all of our actions instead of using our great military to go exactly where all the training and gave them the ability to escape. And then what did we do? We turned to Iraq, and you had mentioned how if we had known that Iran would rise, well, I knew it, and I was an RN.
Caller, I hate to interrupt, but we're running short on time if you had a question or comment for our guest.
Yes. Do you think that talking about the axis of evil, saying Iraq, Iran, North Korea invading Iraq, then set Iran and North Korea to do something because we telegraphed we're going to go after them?
Okay, caller, thank you.
Well, I think the axis of evil comment that President Bush made, really was an attempt to describe what these countries were doing. It is a fact that the Taliban had relationships with elements in Afghanistan, of course with al-Qaeda, that resulted in great harm to the United States. On the other side of it, you have Iran, which has always had influence in parts of Afghanistan. There are linguistic similarities with part of the Afghan population. There are other issues that serve as a common bond between those two countries. The similar thing in Iraq. You have a lot of elements that, of course, have the same religious belief, the Shia sect of Islam, and so there's that synergy between Iraq and Iran. And of course, the Iranians took advantage of what the U.S. was doing in Iraq when it came to Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I think that was a major mistake from the standpoint of U.S. tactics and strategy. We should have gone in there and looked at exactly how the Iranians were going to operate. I knew when I was deployed in support of Iraqi freedom, it was very clear to me that the Iranians were taking advantage of what we had done and were going to leverage that to their advantage. So those are the things that we need to look at. And in terms of Tora Bora, just to briefly address that, I believe that you are correct that we should have gone in a more aggressive posture to really keep the al-Qaeda elements from entering Pakistan from Afghanistan, and Tora Bora would have been potentially one place to do that. And it seems to me that that kind of an operation should have taken care of a lot of the elements that Osama bin Laden was in charge of at that time.
Colonel Cedric Leighton served as a member of the Pentagon Joint Staff from 2005 to 2009. Colonel, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pedro. Thanks for having me.